Hi guys, how do you like that t-shirt? I bought that a while ago. I don't know where to get more, but I have this one. Hey, big news, big day. It's finally out. This is our masterpiece. This is I mean, obviously I'm a little biased. Uh, this is the most devastating takedown of Fauci ever. And for those of you that have been around a while, you know that when Bobby Kennedy wrote his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, he cited the film this book was based on 28 times. And there's a reason for that. Now you can have it in book form. Why in book form? Well, you can't, when you watch a video, you kind of have to stop and you have to turn, just watch the video. You can't do anything else. This, you can read it, a little bit here, a little bit there. You can read it in bed. You can read it at the kitchen table. You can read it in the living room, and you can hand it to people. Okay. Remember how I pushed the Real Anthony Fauci book and I asked people, don't just buy one, buy a bunch. We're keeping the price super low on this, just $9.95. This is a real book, by the way. And we've got lots of pictures. There's Tony when he was lying about AIDS. There's George Bush, who people still don't realize was Tony Fauci's sponsor in the federal government. We've got pictures of Fauci on the prayer candles. It's the whole story. It's the whole story. COVID was 40 years in the making. I seem at this late date to be one of the few people on earth that understand that. The reason it happened and the reason it happened so fast and the reason it happened globally is they had been laying the laying the groundwork, building the foundation for 40 years. And they funded it with Fauci's first fraud, which is HIV equals AIDS equals certain death equals you better take whatever drug we give you or you're going to die miserable and alone. That was the fraud they ran in the 80s, 90s. They're still running it. And I demolish it in this book. There have been a lot of films, there have been a lot of books about this, but I got to tell you, man, this one hits hardest. And it puts little Tony Fauci right where he belongs, at the head of the fraud. And so the book is half of the book is the film, the script of the film with all the, not all of them, but many of the stills from the film. So you can actually flip through this thing. There he is, the liar in chief. What else we got in here? And so we got the film, the script, but we also have the second half of the book, which shows how the AIDS fraud and the COVID fraud are connected. And for those of you for whom this may be a new concept, it's very simple. They claimed that a particular virus was untreatable and was going to cause certain death, and you had to get tested and you had to do whatever the authorities told you to do. That's what they did in the 80s. Same guys, by the way. Even down to the New York Times writers, they just recycled the same old playbook. So in addition to the film, which I hope you've seen at this point, but if you haven't, now you can have it in book form and you can hand it to people and you can give it to your library and you can give it to friends that you know have been trying to understand what happened. It's all understandable. There's no mystery, especially with this book. The mystery is solved of how they did it and how they pulled it off. Part two, we have a lot of material from a guy named Terry Michaels. Everybody should know who Terry Michaels is, and I guarantee not a single podcaster out there, from the most famous one to the most obscure one, knows who Terry Michaels is. Terry Michaels said in 2014, the biggest threat to public health in the world is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He said that in 2014. Terry was a journalist. He was also, believe it or not, the head of press relations for the Democratic National Committee way back when. So this is not some random dude. He said that in 2014. So we have a lot of Terry's writings in this book. I don't think you can get them anywhere else. You can find videos of him talking, but I don't think there's a book out there that has him talking about Fauci long ago. Many people knew Fauci was a fraud for the longest time, and that was kept from the public. So we've got Terry Michaels' writings in here. We have a whole chapter here on the history of remdesivir, the first drug that was approved by emergency use authorization, the one that's probably killed tens of thousands of people. a lot of, I'm going to venture to guess that a lot of COVID deaths were actually remdesivir poisoning. And we've got that all covered here in this book. What else do we have in here? We have the background on the other official COVID drug that they have been giving out to people, which is called, I'll tell you, it's funny. I used to laugh when people would write a book and not remember what was in their own book. I kind of understand that now. Anyway, it's called Paxlovid. Paxlovid. We have a whole chapter on Paxlovid, which if you probably have seen ads for that on TV, and we talk about what a fraud that is. What else did we cover? We covered the fact that even at the height of of COVID, at the worst of COVID, the death rate from infectious diseases in New York City never got to the point of that it was at from 1930s all the way through the mid 1990s. I'm going to say that again. At the height of the COVID deaths, the death rate from infectious disease in New York City never got as high as it had been from the 1930s all the way to the mid 1990s. How do you like that? There's the chart. It's in the book. This kills the COVID fraud dead in its tracks. All right. What else do we have in this book? We also have the reality. This is a very important chapter. I'm glad I put it in this book. It's called The Reality of Vaccine Injuries. And we prove that vaccines actually, in certain instances, injure people and injure them severely, sometimes to the point of death. And we give 3 official proofs. This all comes from the official government documents. And we didn't have to dig. We didn't have to do investigative reporting. We didn't have to give you a Substack thing filled with all kinds of crazy, complicated convolutions. We just put it in simple, plain English. That's what the whole book is about, by the way. Then we have a chart showing all the vaccine injury reports that have occurred up till this point. And then we have an interesting chapter called What is an Anti-Vaxxer? And that's worth the price of the book. Yeah. Please get it. Please support it. And then when you get it, review it on Amazon. Hopefully give it 5 stars. All right. Their algorithm watches that stuff. And if a lot of people review it positively and review it positively and give it high stars, they start pushing the book up. Right now, there is no reason for them to block this book on Amazon. I'm sure they're going to do it, but we can maybe slip in there before they get a chance and get this pushed to the top of Amazon. We're already doing quite well, and I haven't even gotten around to promoting this thing properly. Give it to your librarian. I have a letter. I have a letter on the back of this, basically addressing librarians and indie bookstore owners, where I basically call them out. And I say, this book, only the best libraries, only the best independent bookstores are going to make this book available to their customers and patrons. Okay. And I talk about the program of censorship that the libraries, some libraries, not all, thank God. Shout out to Boulder. Shout out to Austin. Now, these are very liberal, progressive places. They did not take they did not drink the Kool-Aid. They made the Bobby Kennedy book, The Real Anthony Fauci, available. I think they had one of the libraries had 15 copies. Why? Because there was huge demand for it. Be lovely if this book had the same amount. I don't need the money. In fact, I'll give the money away if I make any money from this thing. What I would love to see is for the world to understand that what we just went through, and by the way, we may go through it again if we don't stop these people, was a fraud that was worked out 40 years ago. And they perfected it then. And then they took all the money that they got from that fraud to build literally an international network. It's all explained in this book, to lock us down, to deprive our kids from an education, to deprive our sick and dying relatives and friends from our company, to destroy the fabric of small business in America. Everybody must know a beautiful family-owned business or 2 or 3 or 10 that no longer exist, or that took a really, really hard hit during COVID. And who knows how many people they killed in the hospitals. By the way, that's the next book. The next book is What the Nurses Saw. And it's going to be it's a 4-part series. you know this book, right? This tells you what the Nuremberg Code is. This book is going to go, and this is a real book. This book, and you're getting it at $9.95. That's a deal, guys. This book goes into the depth of the fraud from a scientific and medical point of view. The third book, which is What the Nurses Saw, which is going to come out soon, goes into the mayhem that took place in intensive care units and hospitals, largely in public hospitals, largely among the poor and disadvantaged. The subtitle of that book is Medical Murder during the COVID panic. That's because that's what happened. And then the fourth book is going to be called the can't even remember, the Nuremberg Code and its Modern Enemies. That's going to be the fourth part. That's the fourth book in the series. That's going to come out in 2024. And as a whole, you're going to have the Nuremberg Code. I hope everybody's got it. You're going to have this book so you understand the medical and scientific fraud. You're going to have the eyewitness testimony of ICU nurses, which I started collecting in this early summer of 2020 when memories were fresh. And then you're going to have the Nuremberg Code and its Modern Enemies, which shows the whole propaganda campaign and how the academic world and the scientific world, social media, and all the so-called medical ethicists let us down. It's also going to be a deep history of the Nuremberg Code, which does exist sort of, but again, I'm going to write it in language that everybody can understand. It's good that, scholarly work is very important. I depend on it for my own work, but when it comes to helping the public understand, these aren't complex concepts. None of them are. And that's why I'm presenting them in a simple way, not because people are dumb, but because people don't have time to read an 800-page tome with 1,000 million footnotes. They need something they can pick up, hopefully has some pictures in it, and get the gist. So this is the book form of the film. Unlike a film, which you can reread sections, you can go back, you can go to the table of contents and zero in on what you want to zero in, and most important of all, you can hand it to people. You can't hand people a film, you can't hand people a podcast, you can't hand people a website. So for everybody that's been supporting this, that supports Brass Check, thank you very much. No way could I have done this without you guys. So you're the reason I was able to do this. This is an important book. You'll see when you have this in your hands, you're going to understand how freaking important it is that everybody in this country and in this world has this documentation. Brass Check subscribers, I should have put everybody's name in this book. It would have been a pretty long list. But you are the ones that made this possible. Absolutely possible. And now please go out and support the book. If you're not a Brass Check supporter, I could always use more help because, this is thousands of hours. I mean, not 10,000, but this is certainly in excess of 1,500 hours of work. That's a lot of time to put something together. So I could use your support, but most important, get the book. And when you get it, consider buying. Some of you already know the quality of what we've been doing during COVID. Some of you know us all the way back to 1997 when we were talking about things like drugging children in the schools. We were talking about things like the suppression of the fact that children do get injured by vaccines. We've been talking about the corruption in the medical industry. I said that we lived in a medical dictatorship many times, long before COVID. So longtime subscribers know we've been in this battle, in this war for a long time. But even if you're just a relatively new subscriber, we've been on this, and we've been on this like very few people have. So please get the book, support the book, share the book, spread the book around. And to all our supporters, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You should be proud of yourselves today because you made this possible.